On our morning show today from WRCO, we're pleased to welcome 41st Assembly District Representative Tony Kurtz and representing the 51st Assembly District, Todd Novak, for their monthly visits. Good morning, gentlemen. How are things going?
Good morning to you and all your wonderful listeners. I hope everybody is having a Merry Christmas, start of the season.
Isn't that something?
Hey, good morning. I am ready for the heat wave for the next couple of weeks. It was a long weekend.
25 will feel like a heat wave today, right?
Yeah, and I got a big old house, and it's not fun when it's cold.
We're all kind of going through that. Hard to believe it's the 15th of December.
It really is. This year is just flown by. I mean, it's just hard to believe it. 2026 is upon us.
I thought maybe we would start out and kind of talk about the last year for both of you, and maybe some things that you're proud of from this past year.
No, I think as you look back in 2025, obviously, like all your listeners know, we're still in split government. But I think what I was proud about this year, in particularly, is the state budget. I'm not saying I'm happy with everything in that state budget, but it was something that was a bipartisan compromise with the governor, and it was bipartisan. We had a lot of people that crossed party lines and voted for the state budget, and I was very proud about that. There's a lot of good things in the state budget. There's some things I wasn't real crazy about, but once again, that's part of the compromise. Obviously. There was a lot more funding for roads and bridges, something that was very important, something that Rep. Novak and Rep. Tranel have been working on, along with Senator Mark Lina, as far as the ARIP, the Agricultural Road Improvement Program. That was something that was re-upped in the budget for another $150 million. That's something that's very good for our rural communities. The other thing is we, did more support for rural hospitals. That was something key, with something we pulled more funding from the feds down that will help a lot of our smaller hospitals, like here in Richland or Hillsboro, Reedsburg, etc. But also special education. That was something that was very important to the governor. That was very important to Todd and I also, to get more money into special education for our schools, and that's something we did. I mean, that's going to be a huge amount of money for our public schools, and so that's something I'm very proud about. It was a good budget. And we did some tax relief too. Anybody over the age of 67 is going to see a nice reduction if some of your income is going to be tax free up to $48,000 if you're a married couple of two over the age of 67. Also, we lowered the tax bracket for that second bracket. So there's going to be some tax relief. Also, utility bills. You're going to see in your utility bills that we no longer are taking sales tax from utility bills. That's something that will save folks about 5%. I mean, I know it's not much, but everything helps right now.
How about you, Todd?
Yeah, it was a good budget. I have no problem. A bipartisan budget means everybody's got to give and take, so not everybody's happy. But overall, this is a really good budget. I got quite a bit in the budget, and just more mental health money for schools and colleges. And one of my biggest things was to keep the Office of School Safety funded, which I helped create in 2018, which is near and dear to me. And we were able to get that done working with the governor and the attorney general and my colleagues on both sides. And as Tony said, some of the effects of this will start feeling, have started feeling, and will next year in the next biennium. And so I think overall, I've been in this long enough where there's nothing wrong with compromising, and sometimes you get a better product. I voted against some of when I first was elected, a couple budgets when it was full control, when the Republicans controlled everything, because I didn't think they spent enough on schools. Where a bipartisan budget, it was a lot of give and take. We went right up, man, till the wire. We negotiated very hard with the governor in good faith, and the Senate passed it, and we passed it at 1 in the morning, and the governor signed it at 1:30 the night right away. And so I never thought we'd get it done, but there's a lot of give and take, and I don't mind that.
Mm-hmm.
So right now I know that people are getting their property tax bills, and I'm hearing some things on that. But we did give $1.5 billion, I believe, to schools. Was it, Tony? About $1.5 billion.
You do all in, yes.
Yeah, and so right now you're not giving any money to schools, which is not true. And the biggest expenses, or the biggest portion of the budget, actually is, correct me if I'm wrong, is schools and Medicaid or Medicaid.
Yep,
that's the biggest portion of schools. But what concerns me a little bit is we kicked some cans down the road. Transportation is a big worry because gas tax and all that is dropping, and we kicked some cans down the road that we're going to have to deal with. Because we've got to keep our roads. I think the last couple budgets we've done really good on the roads, and we've just got to keep that up.
Okay. What about disappointments? Anything you can think of?
I think one of the things that I was disappointed about, Todd brought up a good point about the transportation fund. So your listeners have to understand, over the last several budgets, we have put record amounts into roads and infrastructure, and it's something that needed to be done. I mean, I know people are going to automatically think, well, what about Highway 14? There is a schedule, there's a pace that we have to do that. But I mean, we can put a bunch of money in, but the problem is it's workforce. I mean, do we have the folks to actually do the work? And so it's kind of a balancing act. The same thing with broadband. We can put tons of money into broadband, but if you don't have the crews to lay the cable and hook it up and all that stuff, that money's just going to be sitting there. So, but to Todd's point, something that this past budget, we as a state do need to have a conversation, because the last several budgets, as everybody knows, we've had some pretty healthy surpluses, and so a lot of that surplus money over the last several budgets, and to be fair, to include this budget, we have used a lot of that surplus money and put into one-time projects. We've paid for bridges, we've paid for roads, using a lot of one-time money. Well, there's going to be a point where the surpluses, we're not going to be able to rely on the surpluses. And that's back to Todd's point, is we rely so much right now on the gas tax. And one thing that was disappointing me, the gas tax hasn't been raised in over 20 years. It's not been inflated. What used to be indexed to inflation, but that's where, as Republicans, nobody wants to raise the gas tax because it's a tax. Well, we all use the roads, and the method that we pay for the roads now is through the gas tax. And your registration fees, your titling fees. One of the things I didn't like, we did raise, and I have trucks over 6,000 pounds. So people that have vehicles over 6,000 pounds, you're going to see an increase of 10%. I just got my bill for my grain truck; it went up 10%. Those are the things. I wish we could have a conversation about what is that next gas or fee going to be to help maintain and fix roads. Is it nobody? A lot of people don't like tolling. We actually can't do tolling on our current federal highway systems because of the way that was done back in the 50s. Well, you can do it on new. So if they put a lane between Madison and the Dells, if they make 3 lanes, you actually can do new federal projects for tolling. But a lot of people don't like tolling. And then the other thing is you do a mileage base fee. In other words, you basically every mile you got to fill in a form to say I drove 10,000 miles, and you have a formula based on that. And so there's a lot of different things that a lot of different states have done. Florida does something very similar to that. It's basically it's a mileage fee is what they pay, and everybody it's actually tracked on their vehicle, which a lot of people don't like. So that's a discussion I think as a state we need to have, because either one of those methods or a combination thereof, it's going to take years to implement. In other words, like tolling, and I'm not saying we're doing tolling, I'm just saying bringing that up. It will take 8 years to implement something like that. And so in the meantime, as the gas tax revenues actually will start going down as you get different vehicles, if it's electric vehicles or what have you with the future technology, that gas tax will have the stress, because we already see it right now. So.
Mm-hmm. Todd, anything you'd like to say?
Yeah, I mean, I think, too, overall, this is, like as Tony said, this is one-time, a lot of this was one-time money. That's why we had a $4 billion surplus. We're ending After this budget that we just passed, we'll end up with a balance of $750 million or so,
Yep.
and a rainy day fund maybe about $2 billion. And I was looking back when I first my first budget in 2015 was $77 billion. The one we just passed was $111 billion. So that tells you something. I don't want to end up, if you look at our friends in Minnesota and Michigan and Illinois, we're very fortunate in Wisconsin because we're sitting where we are. I know Minnesota's got to come back in because they've got a $3 or $4 billion deficit. Michigan's struggling. Illinois is, I don't even want to look at Illinois. So we're really kind of an island here. With that said, is to piggyback off what Tony said, we have one of the highest gas taxes too in the state. So how much can our people take? So we need to look at some other revenues to fund roads. I think personally, from where was 10 years ago to now, we've done a really good job in rural Wisconsin. When I first came in, everything was southeast Wisconsin. They were building interstates. We were fighting for pennies out here for our roads, and we've done a really good job, and Howard was involved in that, and Tony, of pushing money back out here. I mean, the Lone Rock Bridge wasn't even supposed to be done by now, and we got that moved up. County, I can't think in Richland County. We worked on County O. We got money for that. Created the ARIP program for townships for rural roads, $150 million. So we've done a tremendous job getting money back to the locals, and then also we last session, and I'm hearing thank yous from local governments. We really, and Tony was a leader on that, reworked shared revenues so we get more money coming back, which means to the local governments, which means more to our communities around here.
Mm-hmm. And part of the budget, you go back to that, was communities. Part of that deal was communities also are tied to the sales tax growth. So part of shared revenue, obviously everybody got a bump, and I know some communities said it wasn't enough, but still, the other key thing about that is they're not stagnant. For years they were stagnant. That amount they got and never went up. Now that amount, both amounts now are tied to the sales tax. And so part of the state budget was $68 million more for communities, part of that shared revenue, because sales tax increased, and I suspect you're also going to see another bump here next year because, once again, sales tax is actually doing quite well.
I think too, when you hear, and I hear it, and I'm a local government guy, costs are going up. It costs more to operate. It does for schools and local governments, but also the state is in the same boat. Our costs are going way up, so. You have to look at, we've done a pretty good job getting rid of the sales tax, to taxes that affect real people, and cutting some taxes. But, when we need money, we got to come up with it somewhere too. We're just like the locals and the schools. We don't have a never-ending spigot. We have to find that money. So it's important we don't overspend, and it's important that we're pretty wise with the tax dollars.
Yeah, and our local government, our county governments, everybody's struggling to kind of make ends meet, so to speak, Tony.
No, they are. I mean, just like Todd said. I mean, our health care costs, just went up, just like everybody else. We have over 24,000 people in prison. Well, food prices, energy prices, they affect not only all your listeners, they affect local government, they affect state government, and so we're all feeling it. And I think you're definitely seeing it as you talk to local businesses, as you talk to some charities. To be honest, they have seen their donations down a little bit. But some of the businesses I've talked about, they see their sales, or somebody might be holding back a little bit on purchases. The people are weary. I mean, and it is, to Todd's point, it is kind of catching up because we've had how many years of inflation, that equated to wage increases, and transportation increases, utility increases, insurance increases. So those are, unfortunately, I don't have a great answer for folks because we're dealing with the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a rough, since COVID, really. It's been a rough 5 years, and people are cautious. But I also have heard for the Christmas season from some realtors that are really happy, or retailers that are really happy with this year. Black Friday or whatever was one of the biggest Black Fridays they've had for a long time. And I mean, so it's mixed messages. So we're a little different world out here. So, we'll see how things come out.
We talked about the schools. We've talked about voucher schools here recently on the program. I think we wanted to kind of touch base on that again. We've talked before, Tony, about declining enrollment. I think that's a number one thing. But in the meantime, we got to figure out a way to keep these schools afloat, though, too.
And I agree with you, Phil. It's just, but once again, it goes back to having a realistic conversation about what does that footprint look like moving forward. I've mentioned this before, and I will continue to mention this. We are 60,000 less students in K-12 education across the board. I mean, it doesn't matter what, if it's vouchers or private or public, but we're 60,000 less students than we were 10 years ago. The UW system is 16,000 less students than we were 10 years ago. And once again, it's not because people are moving. It's not because it's because we just simply do not have the birth rates like we had 10, 20, 30 years ago. And that is, you're seeing that across the board. You're seeing that in our churches, our service organizations, and once again in our schools. And so I think as a state, I know some of my colleagues recently have introduced some proposals to look at consolidation. They're not forcing anybody to do that, but they're looking at doing a study. They're looking about how can you incentivize schools to do that. I mean, there is actually laws on the books to allow schools to consolidate. The problem is they're not very good incentives. Otherwise, more schools would take opportunities to do that. That's been on the books for about 15, 20 years now. So I think that's something we as a state we need to look at to say, okay, what incentives can we give schools to try to look at consolidating? Because all due respect, I don't like it either, but we need to have a strong conversation about that. And to be further, last budget, once again, you're talking about shared revenue. We did a fund called Innovation Fund. It's basically how do you have locals also consolidate? It doesn't matter if it's fire or EMS. How can you have communities join together to maybe run one fire department for a big area, or EMS, or, shared services like human resources, whatever. I just think we need to start thinking outside the box as our population is declining to see how we can share services. I mean, and school districts are, I hate to say it, are a prime example of that. But it's also a fine line because you don't want kids to run a bus for 2 hours either. I mean, so that's where I think we need to have an honest discussion, and that's what bothers me is I think Todd and I are pretty even-keeled individuals. We actually want to find answers or get answers to things and try to find solutions. It's very hard when you have one side saying, well, you're just not funding schools, and the other side saying, well, we're giving plenty of funding. It's somewhere in the middle on what we need to try to find that middle ground. And I think I know I'm ready to have that discussion. And to be fair, I know this is a very sensitive subject to people about Richland, UW Richland campus here. That's something, once again, the UW had a massive footprint. And unfortunately, due to, like I said, 16,000 less students, that footprint needed to shrink. And as much as I hate to say it, we need to have a similar conversation about K-12.
Todd, you have a lot of small districts in your area, too.
14 school districts. My largest is about 2,000. That's in Mount Horeb. And even they're decreasing enrollment. Some of my smaller ones are 225 to 250 K through 12. I've got 3 or 4 school districts that are within 6 miles of each other. What we, like Tony said, what we need to do is have a serious conversation. And I will never, ever vote to force schools to consolidate. That's their own decision, but we need to put some carrots out there for them. And I do see my school districts are sharing services with other school districts. They're doing that on their own. I think some of them out here are a little out ahead of the curve. But how much money can you put into declining enrollment? I mean, it is a fact. And it's how much you can't just say we're declining enrollment, just give us more money. That doesn't solve the problem, as Tony says. We need to have some serious conversations. And I sometimes get disappointed because I do keep in touch with some of my superintendents and their conversations with me in their office alone are a lot different than what they have in the public, and I understand that. Sometimes it's easy to have a boogeyman and say it's the state's fault. It's the state's fault, and I'm not saying they're in a predicament, but it's a lot of factors. It's not just the state. When you look at, I look at back when I went to school in Iowa Grant, and the enrollment now there compared to when I went to school, it's like half. In my time in office, I've got school districts that are down 300-400 kids. It's fast. It's a fast drop. So we do need to, and with all stakeholders at the table, the school district, the School Superintendents Association, Wisconsin Association of School Boards needs to be at the table, and we need to be in the room together, and we need to have an honest conversation, not just talking points. It's just like you mentioned voucher schools, which comes up, and we just had a conversation about that. And I will ask my superintendent, so everything that we're paying, all the money that goes to the voucher schools and choice schools, if we gave you that money, that would solve all your problems, right? And they always say, well, no, but it'd be a start. So that money would not. There's pro and cons to that, but so it just comes down. But taxpayers have had about it up to their neck, and I'm starting to hear from a lot of taxpayers. They've just about had it. A lot of it the reason out here is because of the sales have gone up over the years. A lot of municipalities are reassessing, which is affecting their taxes. We went through a huge period of reassessments over the last 2 or 3 years, and that's affecting their taxes. So all of a sudden they're seeing increase. Some people are seeing big increases, and so I'm one of these. Let's just get in a room and come out with a solution. We did that with shared revenue. Mm-hmm. Not everybody was on the same page, but we ended up. And not everybody was happy when we were done, but we need to have those conversations.
Yeah. But I want to emphasize, this is not unique to our area. I mean, just back in November, Oshkosh Oshkosh is a big city, big area. I mean, even the Oshkosh School District lost 177 kids. And that's $7 million or $6 million off there. Because we pay, just like a lot of states, we pay on a per pupil basis. So when you lose 177 kids because of just, once again, declining enrollment, not having the birth rates, that really affects the school's budgets. And that's where it's interesting, Phil, if you and I would have had this conversation probably 5 or 6 years ago. Well, I've had this conversation with people 5 or 6 years ago. And you said the nasty word consolidation. People would say, first of all, I have had people very not so nicely say certain things to me about that. But now, as you start talking to people, as people start actually looking around our state or our community, they say, you know what, we do need to look at it. It's not a dirty word like it was 5 or 6 years ago. And I think that's where we need to be willing to Todd's point, to come to the table and say, okay, what's this going to look like? And unfortunately, people want to make this a political issue, just like a lot of things, and that's why we can't solve some of the problems, because it becomes so political. But these are discussions we need to have, and it's going to come to a head. It's not going to get better. Mm-hmm. Is my point.
Taxpayers aren't so happy about paying, though, for vouchers, though.
But then, you know what? Just like I mentioned before a couple of months ago on the air, we are all paying, the state of Wisconsin collectively are paying for all the voucher schools in Milwaukee. That was a program that was passed 15 years ago, and it was slowly, because just how bad Milwaukee public schools are. So as a state, collectively, Republicans and Democrats came together and said, okay, we as a state, we're going to pay for Milwaukee's program because their public schools are just so atrocious. Okay? We could do the same thing here in the state. It's called decoupling. We can separate the two. I've had a bill. I've done it twice. I'm ready to do it, and we can fix the problem. But that's not – I will get political for a minute. Governor Evers has he does not want to do it, period. I've met with his staff. I'm ready to do it. The assembly's ready to do it. We can do it, but some people have to contact the governor's office and say, hey, why don't you want to do decoupling? Because we can fix the problem. easily.
Why do you think that he's not in favor?
Because it's a political issue, period. He wants this discussion right now. Unfortunately, especially when you look at the southeast part of the state, voucher schools, private schools are very popular. In my assembly district, I have 18 school districts. I have 2 of those schools. One's in Reedsburg and one is here. So in our area, it's not that big of a now I understand it's sensitive to people. It's more on the eastern side of the state. And to be fair, it's Milwaukee. I mean, I hate to say it, Milwaukee Public Schools in any metrics, they are in some metrics, they are the worst school district in the nation. And so when you talk about, when people talk about need more money, Milwaukee Public Schools, their school district, it's about $25,000 per student. But yet less than 50% of their kids can actually read at grade level. So, money doesn't fix everything. And so for those school districts, for saving grace, for some of those kids that are in horrible situations, those private schools, those charter schools actually gave them a chance to succeed in life.
Mm-hmm. And their graduation rate's horrible. Mm-hmm. Their graduation rate's around 50% or more, or around there too in Milwaukee.
And I'll go even further. During the budget, this was a discussion. I personally met with the governor's staff. Say, let's work on this together. Let's continue conversations, and we kept getting pushed off. So I am more than willing to fix this.
And there's members on the other side of our other party that support voucher. It isn't just a Republican issue. There's Democrats in the Assembly and Senate that support them too. So there's legislators whose kids went to charter voucher schools. So it's not this is a Republican siphoning money off. It's both parties support it because of how atrocious the Milwaukee school system is. And I don't think anybody in Southwest Wisconsin would want to send their child to be educated in Milwaukee. I hate to say that. I'm not anti-Milwaukee, but it is the truth.
Todd, wanted to ask you a little bit about the Coles Act bill, which I know you were one of the co-authors on that, were you not?
Is that we have bills. Which bill is that? I've got 3 bills.
That is for the pharmacy.
PBMs. Yeah. Yes, reforming PBMs. What it does is it takes out the middleman. Right now, drug prices a lot of our pharmacies in Southwest Wisconsin, in my district, are independent. Sure, we have Walgreens and stuff like that, but what the PBM does is the middleman between the insurance company and the pharmacist. And what they do is they tell the pharmacist what drug to use when they're filling my prescription. And sometimes it's getting to a point where, and the PBM keeps some of the profits, the money. Some pharmacies fill prescriptions at a loss because the PBM tells them, no, use this brand instead of this brand, because the PBM makes more money, not the pharmacy. It's become a problem, and I'm actually concerned because, as I said, I have got a lot of independent pharmacies out here. And some of them, and I'm an example is I went to the pharmacy one day to get a refill, and they said, we can't carry that anymore. You'll have to go to one of the bigger pharmacies. And I know the pharmacist really well. He's a really good friend. I said, why can't you carry it? We're losing $5 a prescription on this. So because the PBM says that we have to give you this brand, and it costs us whatever. So or else when people see they get a refill, and then the next month they get another refill for the same exact medicine, and it says, they put a sticker on the bottle that says this pill is exactly what you were taking. It's just a different color, a different shape, or whatever. That's the PBM saying you need to switch. So it's gotten to be a little out of control, and the pharmacies are not making any money. It's the PBMs that are making money. So what this does is reform the PBMs, and pretty much put you between your doctor and your pharmacist, not going through a middleman. And this will be the third. We did some reforms last session, and this is kind of more reforms. Whether we get across the finish line, Senator Mary Foskowski and myself, and Howard's a co-author on it too. I don't know if Tony's on it or not. We're really trying hard to get it across the finish line this time. Mm-hmm. So it's a complicated thing. to talk about. But you I would have your listeners ask your pharmacist about PBMs and see what they say. He knows what they'll say. So
right. Certainly, healthcare, that's a crisis in the area. I'm guessing that's one of the things you hear about when you're out in your public.
It's that, and also, I just read a study, and I can't remember who wrote the study. It was one of the national organizations about actually in rural areas we have worse outcomes than people that are in more metropolitan areas, and that's something that does bother me because. Some of it has to do with preventive care. I don't understand why a lot of people maybe they don't want to get preventive care, like a colonoscopy or mammograms or things like that. But I do think that's what, like I said, this budget and other budgets, we've put a lot more money into rural health care because it is a concern. And if you look at Wisconsin as a whole, we do have a lot of rural areas, and that does concern me about how do we make sure that people get the care that they need. And that's why these consolidation of some of these larger hospital systems does concern me, because what concerns me on that is, what if some of our small clinics or small hospitals in rural areas start to close? Then that's going to be another barrier. People are going to have to drive to Madison or drive to La Crosse, and let's be honest, especially some of our elderly and more vulnerable populations, they're not going to drive. They're not going to take that chance to. So that's why it's very important to have that health care close to home.
We had a question from a listener about tax bills. 4,900 acres are in a township. They're asking about how they manage forest cropland and how that should be taxed. Tony?
So managed forest law is something that landowners can enroll their land in, to particularly if they're going to produce a forest, timber. So managed forest law, it all depends, and I've got that listener's number, and I will give him a call, because it depends on how it's enrolled. You have open and closed. So basically what that means is if you allow people to come on your land, if you enroll into managed forest law and you allow people to come on your land to hunt, you are actually going to pay a little less in property taxes versus if you close the land. In other words, you close the land, obviously people are not going to allow to hunt on your land. The other thing about, so it really depends on when it was put in enrolled, and two, if it's open or closed, depending on how much tax base the township's going to get on that. The other, and it just a segue, it's interesting. I think I told you last time I was on the radio, I'm working on the stewardship program to get that reauthorized. One of the things we're looking at right now is, so when we own state land, it's called payment in lieu of taxes. In other words, as a state, if the DNR owns land or DOT owns land, we actually pay back to the community, the township, or we pay them a payment in lieu of taxes. It's called PELT. We updated that a couple years ago in one of the budgets. We went from like 50 cents an acre to $3.50 an acre. But managed forest law, we do something very similar to that. We pay communities that have managed forest law, we as a state actually pay 20 cents an acre to those townships and villages that have managed forest law in their jurisdiction to help alleviate the decrease in the tax base. That number has not been updated since 1985, the 20 cents per acre. That's one thing that I want to try to get that number increased, because it is woefully low. But once again, it's when the program was developed in 1985. It's never been increased. So that's something that we could help a lot of locals by just, even if we quadrupled it, that would be pretty beneficial to people. But I've got his number, and I'm going to follow up and see what specific his question is.
Speaking of fishing and hunting, I think we talked about it last time, but maybe increasing the price of out-of-state people.
It actually would kind of segued with the deer hunting. We talked about that. And so all is like Senator Mark Line and I introduced a bill. We talked about the fish and wildlife account in the state and the number of people that are just not getting the hunting and fishing like they used to. So you look at the revenue in our fish and wildlife account, it's down. And so one of the things we looked at all our peers in the Midwest, and where they're non-resident. Once again, I'm going to stress this is for non-resident hunting or fishing licenses, where we rated with our peers, and we're very low compared to what our peers were. So it'd be a modest increase. It'd probably $10 or $20 depending on the license or the that someone's going to buy if they're going to hunt turkey or deer or bear or whatever. We'd probably increase those non-resident hunting and fishing fees for certain activities. So we got some pretty good bipartisan support on that. It's something, once again, we need to help shore up that Fish and Wildlife account.
Todd, did you hear if numbers were pretty good for the amount of licenses and hunters this year? You heard about
I think they're down a little bit, weren't they?
We were down just like 1%.
Right.
So,
right.
The weather actually, I harvested a real nice 8-point and a couple does, and my brother-in-law got 3 deer, and so we did our part. No, the numbers, it was better than I anticipated. I was concerned the numbers were going to be down. It'll be interesting to see once they get some preliminary data on, if people got their deer tested or not for CWD. That obviously is a concern for some hunters. But no, I was pleased with the hunt. I was actually, like I said, I'd rather have it be up 1%, but at least we were maintaining. But the herd is, like I said, they were estimating the herd was about over 2 million deer. So we need a harvest. We need a good harvest.
And people just don't seem to deer hunt like they used to.
No.
And did you get your deer in state or out of state?
I got my deer in my backyard.
Oh, okay. See, I knew he didn't go far. If he was going to get one, wouldn't go far.
No.
So.
His schedule wouldn't allow, right?
Yeah, he's a busy guy.
Another bill that I saw come across the desk was about veterans homeless shelters. Are you aware of that? Or
Yeah, we're trying to. They had 2 of them got closed, right? Tony's going to have to fresh me. He's on JFC, and we're trying to get some money back into that. That was a political move too, and the governor, he waited till we passed the budget, didn't ask for it in the budget, and then closed the 2 after we passed the budget and said it was because we wouldn't give him money. So, but he also didn't ask. So, but we need to take care of our veterans. I think that's a number 1 priority. So.
Anything you wanted to add, Tony?
No, the Veterans Home. So when we get these budget papers, we have obviously these Veterans Homes around the state, and this was more for the homeless shelters that are part of some of these Veterans Homes. And it's interesting. In the budget papers that we get, they give us decision points on, if funding's provided, this is what it can do. If funding's not provided, this is what the ramification. Nowhere in there did it say that these homes would close if they did not get the funding. And so that's where, to Todd's point, this was a political move. And what I mean by that is we did put money for veterans in the state budget. It was overall increase. It wasn't this particular program because there was already money in that program. There's approximately $1 million that was unused. So, and we also, as we go through the Joint Finance Committee, we close, as we get done with an agency, we'll close that agency. And it's interesting, Veterans Affairs was closed on the 4th of June. We literally just closed that one just like we would close, DSPS or DATCAP, Department of Ag Trade, and then we'll continue on to the next one. Well, that was on the 4th of June. The budget was signed on, at like Todd said, like 2 a.m. on the 3rd of July. Then on July 11th, the governor made an announcement that he was going to close 2 of these veteran homes because of inadequate funding. It kind of got my crawl because, once again, we met with the governors and the governor's office at least a dozen times as we went through the budget process. Not once was this brought up. Not once. The Joint Finance Chair, Rep. Bourne, actually met with the Secretary of Department of Veterans Affairs, Secretary Bond, about some other issues that were going on in the state budget. It was never brought up to Rep. Bourne. I saw Mr. Bond at the Army's birthday, the 250th birthday on 13th of June. From me to you, what are we 5 feet away from Secretary Bond? We shook hands, said hi, and not a word. So to Todd's point, once again, I know I don't get very political. This was totally a political move because it could have been fixed. And so this bill basically shores up that funding because it was never brought up. It was done after the fact, and to me, it was quite. It was using veterans. They totally used veterans, and it's something that could have been easily rectified.
Oh, but, yeah, if it was only $1.5 million, wasn't it? I mean, easily we would have funded it.
Yeah,
never asked for it.
It was totally political, and that's once again, I know it's just those are the things that frustrate me.
Well, let's look ahead a little bit. 2026. It's going to be an interesting year. You know, there's a race for governor brewing up.
Yeah, it's good. I think, I'm up. This year, Howard's up. This will be. I've already ran in my new district since the lines changed last election. This will be Howard's first time. Senator Markline running in his new seat. Tony, he's a pro at this, so he's got his district, and so it'll be an interesting year. The open seat in the governor, lieutenant governor. We'll see how. It'll be a good year for you at the radio station, I would say. Your listeners will hate us by November, and the TV stations and online. But in fact, I was laughing. They're already running online stuff against me. And it's a year out. So it's like this is going to be a very interesting election. But I would assume open governor's race, first time in 15 years. That's going to suck the oxygen up out of the room, and. So we'll see how this goes, and the Democrat primary is getting bigger by the day.
Yeah.
So to me,
all these candidates.
I like watching both sides and what's going on. So it's going to be interesting to me to watch how that all plays out because it's going to be interesting. And we have two on our side. Republicans have two. I've heard possibly a third one jumping in. I don't know if that's true or not, but it's going to be fun to watch. Not fun for me being on the ground. Howard, I'm one of the number one targets in the Assembly. Howard's the number one target in the Senate. So he and I will be battling together in my Assembly district and see how it goes.
You're not running for governor, though.
Gosh, no. Tony might someday, but I have my seat's rough as it is. I'm not going any higher than that. So,
Tony, how do you see the next year in the election and anything else?
Unfortunately, to Todd's point, I mean, we're already in the election season. I mean, obviously, there's 9 on the Democrat side. There's 2 or 3, like you said, Todd's point. It's interesting. In 2026, obviously, you're going to have a Supreme Court race in April. You're going to see a lot of advertising on that. But then it's interesting because this governor's race, there's obviously all the reps are up and, Congress are up, but, there's no Senate, there's no U.S. Senate race, and there's also no presidential race. So it's truly going to be all about the governor and who controls the governorship. So, it's going to be a ton of money. It's going to be a ton of advertising. I guess things I'm focusing on are the only things I can control. It's like stewardship. We talked about Knowles Nelson. That's something that we need to try to figure out a way to get that reauthorized. I mean, I have some of my colleagues that are not real happy with the program because they feel that Knowles Nelson is buying all this land up north and hurting the tax base. And then you have others that, want some massive program, expansion of the program. And I know Todd and I right now are trying to find a middle ground on how we can get that program reauthorized because it is very popular in our area. It's something that has done some incredibly good projects, and so it's on life support right now because the program will end on the 30th of June of 26 if we don't do something to reauthorize the program, and so that's why we've worked really hard to try to get that common ground to see how we can thread the needle to make sure everybody can have that program sustained.
Are you on a holiday break right now from the Assembly?
No, I mean I got meetings this week. I mean we kind of starting next week. We're going to probably take our break, but we're come January 6th or 7th, we're going to be right back down in the Capitol. Like I said, we got work to do. I mean, we got stuff we got to get finished.
Yeah, I've got committee meetings this week, so we'll just probably the Christmas week and New Year's. I know, but I've got stuff in district, which is I would rather much be out here doing stuff like this and doing breakfasts or dinners and meeting with constituents than being at the Capitol any day. That's actually makes this job fun.
Good conversation today, gentlemen. Merry Christmas to you.
No, Merry Christmas to you and all your wonderful listeners, and have a blessed New Year.
I assume you have our present after we're done here?
Your present? I can probably find something. Oh, man. Thanks a lot. 41st Assembly District Representative Tony Kurtz and 51st Assembly District Representative Todd Novak on today's morning show.